Okay, drumroll please, our main speaker of the night. All the way from over there.
Gibson. This is not my Bible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I said Devan Gibson.
Devan.
But I didn't kind of a mic drop kind of way. I looked at the camera, Peter's and said it.
All right. I'm going to start in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, verse number 1. It says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for. It is the evidence of things not seen." Things not seen. Now, faith is an idea. Faith is a belief. But the scripture refers to faith as a substance. And the substance is supposed to be the evidence of everything that you have not seen. It's all of your promises. It's all of the prayers. It's everything that God has shown you that has not yet come to pass. So how can this intangible idea or belief be evidence of anything? Because evidence can only be observed as proof that something has already happened. Evidence can only come forth after an event has already taken place. Remember that. In 2 Kings chapter 6, we read that Elisha and his servant are surrounded by the Syrians. And Elisha's servant cried to Elisha and said, "What shall we do?" And he said, "Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them." Now the servant was more than likely confused when Elisha said this thing, because he looked around and he didn't see anybody else around them. That was until Elisha laid his hands on him and said, "Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes." And it says, "And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha." Now, the servant, he wasn't blind. The Lord didn't heal him of his blindness. He wasn't physically blind. It's just that God was showing Elisha things that he wasn't yet showing to the servant. It's because Elisha had a vision that nobody else could see yet. And the thing about vision is, not everybody is going to see the same things you see. Not everybody's going to expect the same outcomes that you're expecting. For example, if I were to take off, I don't have prescription glasses on right now, but it'd be really gross if I did this with my contacts. So, anyway, so if I were to take off my prescription glasses and put them on you, I looked at the 3 people with glasses. Oh my gosh, okay. So if I were to take my prescription glasses off, and I were to put them on you in the middle, right there, the only one with not glasses. If I were to take my glasses off, put them on you, and you tried to look through my lenses, you would more than likely be blind. You wouldn't be able to see, because my vision is not your vision, nor your vision my vision. And the thing is, most of the people you encounter are not going to see the same things that you see. They're not going to have the same understanding of the thing that you have the understanding of, because and sometimes it's your family and it's your friends who have a hard time seeing what God has shown you. And the only thing you can do is say, "God, open their eyes. Why can't they see what you have shown me?" Now, when I was 15 years old, that's when I received my calling to preach. When I was 15, I waited a full year to tell anybody. I didn't tell Size, I didn't tell Mary, didn't tell Brother Griffiths, didn't tell anybody. And so I decided I was finally going to tell someone. I was going to tell my dad. And we pull up in our driveway, he parks. I say, "Hey, Dad, don't get out of the car. I need to tell you something." So I sit there and I talk to him for about 30 to 40 minutes straight, just rambling, saying how God has shown me these things in my life, how God has called me to preach, how I've stayed up late nights just crying and praying, saying, "God, I don't want this call." I was like, "I don't want this." And then eventually, as I kept saying, "God, I don't want this," preachers would come to me in the altar, lay their hands on me and say, "Devan, God has called you to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ word for word." And as I got done telling him all these things that God has revealed to me, the only thing he could say was, "Preachers don't make a lot of money." He said, "Preachers don't make a lot of money." So that was his way of saying, "Devan, I think you missed the mark. I don't see it yet, or at least I don't see it." But eventually, as he saw me to start being used more and more to preach down here and to speak on the platform that one time, he started just, over the years, and it took about 2 years from the age of 16 to the age of 18 for him to finally see what I saw in myself. And that was what God had shown me about myself. That is what I was telling him about in the car ride. So this was a scenario in which God may show it to you instantly, but to others gradually. God may show it to you instantly, but to others gradually. That is why faith is the evidence of things not seen. Now in Acts chapter 12, we read that King Herod killed James, the brother of John, and now he is after Peter. And it says, "Peter therefore was kept in the prison, but prayer was made without ceasing unto the church unto God for him, of the church unto God for him. And it said, and behold, an angel of the Lord came unto him, and shined a light in the prison. And he smote Peter on his side, raised him up, saying, arise up quickly. And the chains fell off of his hands. Now Peter was on death row. Peter that very next morning was going to be killed by King Herod if it wasn't for a church that would pray without ceasing. And an angel came for Peter that night. And that night, after he was freed, he goes on to walk to Mary, the mother of John's house, where the congregation was gathered together praying. And it says, and as Peter knocked on the door of the gate, a damsel came to hearken named Rhoda. And when she knew Peter's voice, she opened not the gate, but for gladness ran back and told how Peter stood before the gate. And they said unto her, when she told them this, they said unto her, thou art mad, but she constantly affirmed it was even so. So when she ran back inside and told them how Peter stood at the gate, they called her crazy. As they were in this very prayer meeting to pray for Peter, they doubted that this miracle that Peter would be freed and show up on their doorstep was ever going to happen. Now, Rhoda, she didn't run back to the house because she thought it was Peter. The Bible says she ran back because she knew it was Peter, and more specifically, she knew him by the sound of his voice. In other words, she knew what her miracle was going to sound like. She knew what her miracle was going to look like when it walked in through that door. Now, I don't believe Rhoda was the only one that could identify Peter by the sound of his voice, because Peter's wife and Peter's children were also in that prayer meeting and in that city at the same time. But I believe she was the only one that was listening for his voice. I believe that as everybody was praying, that as she was praying, that every time that there was a knock on the door, she would be the first one to run and to open it, because she was expecting the miracle more than everybody else in that prayer meeting. Now, one man from each of the, I'm doing like 1,000 stories tonight, but they all coincide. Now, one man from each of the 12 tribes of Israel were chosen to spy on the promised land of Canaan. And only 2 spies, Caleb and Joshua, had the faith that Israel could defeat the Canaanites. So remember, the faith is the evidence of things not seen, because only 12 spies got to see their future promised land. Only 12 spies, only 12 Israelites got to walk in their promise before anybody else did. Only 12 spies got to see the houses they would build that they did not, to see the houses they would live in that they did not build. They saw the crops they would harvest that they did not plant. Everybody else, all of the other thousands of Israelites, were back at camp, waiting to hear what the spies have seen, waiting to hear what they have seen. And when they returned, all but 2 of them, Caleb and Joshua, all but 2 of them said, we are not able to go up against them, because they are stronger than us. And there we saw the sons of Anak, which come from giants, and we look like grasshoppers compared to them. And after all of this, after they heard all this, the Israelites, they started getting scared, and they said one to another, let us make a captain and return us into the land of Egypt. They wanted to go back to Egypt. And after Caleb and Joshua heard this, they spake unto the company of the children of Israel, saying, the land which we have passed through and searched it was an exceeding good land, a land that flows with milk and honey. They were trying to entice the Israelites. They were trying to reaffirm their promise. Now, to break it down, Joshua was from the tribe of Ephraim, but the scripture specifically points out Caleb when it says, and Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. Now, Caleb was one of the 12 spies. Caleb was the chosen spy out of the tribe of Judah, and we know that the name Judah in Hebrew means praise. So when everybody else had their doubts, it was a descendant of praise that said we can do it, because praise has always been a reflection of confidence in the promise. Need some water. Not right now. It's good. Like 2 minutes. Anyways, and I close. These 3 people, Elisha, Rhoda, and Caleb, saw things that other people couldn't see. They heard things that other people couldn't hear. And when nobody was going to believe them until they saw it for themselves. So when you tell people, like I told my dad, when you tell people things that God has shown you and things that God has told you, and they say, I don't believe it or I don't see it, just remember that God revealed it to you and not to them. God revealed it to you and not to them. And that eventually the servant was able to see what Elisha saw. That eventually everybody heard Peter's voice as he walked in through the door, and Israel did eventually conquer the promised land. So God may show it to you instantly, but to others gradually.
Thank you, Brother Devan Gibson. Let me see. He told me I could comment on what he spoke about a little bit.
Yeah, please clear it up.
No. He said that faith was always a sign of, or that praise was always a symbol of confidence. That's what praise is. See, I think sometimes as young people we've hard, like I'm young still. I try to be as young as young are. I don't know what Fortnite is or PUBG is, but I try to be young and hip with it, you know what I'm saying? I was actually in a group message with some of y'all. What is PUBG? Why don't I have clothes on? How do you get clothes? I feel like an idiot. But, so this whole praise and worship thing's a little confusing. See, when you're 13, you don't know why your parents are jumping up and down and running the aisles and why people are acting out. See, praise is not just being hyped. See, that's the world tries to say. Because you hear the illustration, well, they jump at football games, so we should jump in church. And that is all true and dandy. But praise is so much deeper and more spiritual than that. Praise is manifested faith. Faith that you speak out is faith. I believe God's going to do it. You think it, it grows in your hearts, and you see it. But manifested faith is when you are able to lift your hands, when you're able to worship God, when you put your actions to what you believe, because the moment you need faith to speak the most is usually the moment you don't want to worship. You ever wonder why it's so much harder to worship when you don't believe that God's going to do it? It's hard to lift your hands when you're disappointed about something that's happened in your life. When you've messed up or failed, the next Sunday it's hard to be exuberant in your worship. Why? Because your faith is battered, and so you have a hard time manifesting it. When you worship, it's not for other people, and it's not just to make energy and hype. You're showing God, I am manifesting my faith. And so that's what, when he said that, that's what stuck out to me. That's why we praise and worship, because they can't see why you're worshiping, and they may think you're crazy. But God's giving you a vision that no one else can see. You're wearing your own lenses. They can't understand it, but you're manifesting. When you worship, they say, I don't know what they think they see. I don't know what God told them, but I know they believe it, so I'm going to believe it too. And it's contagious. It's contagious. I can't get into details because, I'm a private individual. But I've had two big moments in my life where I saw something that no one else saw, and people closest to me, when they didn't see it, I had a choice to make. I could question it and give up on it, or I could keep pursuing it. Now here's the trap. When you see something that no one else sees, you can very easily become bitter. They don't believe in me, a bunch of doubters, hashtag, like the whole, the hype speech, But that's not God's will. When you see it and they don't, how you know that you're pure and what you're seeing is the fruit you produce. If you keep preparing, you keep reaching, even though people close to you cannot see it, but yet you don't grow bitter towards them, that shows you that your endeavor is true and pure and of God. Because the quickest thing you can do is get agitated with those that don't believe in you like you believe in you. Your vision is from God. Your confidence is from God. The image that you're pursuing, it is from God. But when those around you don't see it, you're trying to push them away and prove them wrong. God doesn't want you to prove your doubters wrong. He just wants you to prove your faith right. And I noticed that within me, that I was sometimes so obsessed with proving what I saw right and they didn't see, that bitterness and resentment can be birthed into your life through that. See, that's the hardest test. It's almost the greatest test. I pray that everybody has some point in your life where you see it with your parents, your friends, your siblings, nobody else sees it. Because if you see it and no one else sees it, and you live it out and it happens, from that moment on, you know, I have a faith that is real. How do you think Joseph felt whenever he said, I'm going to rule over something? People, the stars are bowing to me. And I think that you are bowing in my dream. And his father got angry at him and said, who do you think you are? It's one thing for your siblings to be angry at you, but there's another thing when his father got angry at him for his vision. People will question because they want to protect you. Your vision. Are you sure? Are you sure? Because people don't want you to be disappointed. Are you sure you're going to do this? It's like, I used to not speak very well at all, but yet I felt called to preach. And people, are you sure? Is speaking your thing? Are you sure? I don't want you to be disappointed. But I saw something that no one else did. See, you can see something that you're not yet before they see it in you. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen. You just got to latch onto that and allow who you are to match the person God said you'll be, and pursue that with everything within you. When you do that, you realize that what I have is real in my life. Say with me.